Something just happened in Formula One that nobody expected this early in the season. Max Verstappen, the reigning world champion, suddenly lost power in the Chinese Grand Prix. His Red Bull slowed. The steering wheel briefly went dark. And with only a few laps remaining, the RB22 was forced to retire from the race. But that is not the part that has the entire paddock talking tonight. Because only hours after the race finished in Shanghai, the FIA started taking a closer look at the Red Bull Ford power unit. Data. Hybrid deployment. Electrical systems. Everything. And when the FIA starts reviewing the engine data of the reigning champion's car, it usually means something unusual happened. The timing could not be worse for Red Bull. This was only the second race of the season. The RB22 already looked difficult to drive all weekend. Verstappen started only 8th on the grid. And while he retired, the rookie Isaac Hadjar managed to finish 8th. Which suddenly raises a massive question for the entire championship. Did the Chinese Grand Prix just expose a simple reliability problem? Or the first serious weakness in Red Bull's new Ford engine project? Because if the FIA finds something deeper inside that hybrid system, this story could change the entire season. The first thing that made this situation explode across the paddock was not just the retirement. Formula One teams deal with DNFs all the time. Engines fail. Gearboxes break. Hydraulics stop working. But what made the Chinese Grand Prix different was the type of failure that hit the RB22. Because according to early reports from inside the paddock, the problem was not mechanical. It was electrical. And in modern Formula One, electrical problems almost always point toward the hybrid system. The moment Verstappen reported the power loss, engineers immediately began studying the telemetry. Thousands of signals. Energy deployment levels. Battery temperature. Voltage stability. MGUK performance. Every detail of the hybrid system was being analyzed in real time. At first, the data looked confusing. The combustion engine was still running normally. Fuel pressure looked stable. Oil pressure looked normal. But the electric boost was behaving strangely. Sometimes the system delivered full power. Other times it simply stopped deploying energy. And that inconsistency is exactly what drivers describe as sudden power loss. You press the throttle expecting full acceleration, but part of the engine simply does not respond. Then came the moment that truly worried the engineers. The steering wheel display shut off briefly during the failure. That detail may sound small, but in Formula One, it is incredibly important. Because the steering wheel display is connected to the central electronic control system of the car. If that display loses power, even for a moment, it suggests that the electrical network inside the car experienced an interruption. And that can affect multiple systems at once. Hybrid deployment. Energy recovery. Control electronics. All of them rely on stable electrical communication. From that moment forward, the Red Bull engineers understood something serious was happening. The hybrid system was not behaving normally. And when hybrid systems start showing instability, the risk increases very quickly. Voltage spikes can damage batteries. Temperature increases can force automatic shutdowns. And control software may disable the system to protect expensive components. That is exactly why Verstappen's car continued running but lost so much performance. The system was protecting itself. Limiting power. Reducing deployment. Trying to prevent a catastrophic failure. For a few laps, the team tried to manage the problem. They adjusted energy deployment settings, changed power modes, and asked Verstappen to modify his driving slightly. But nothing restored the lost power. Lap after lap, the RB22 became slower. And eventually Red Bull made the decision every team hates to make. Retire the car. Not because the engine had exploded, but because the hybrid system could no longer deliver stable performance. That decision ended Verstappen's race while he was running in 6th place after recovering from a difficult start. But the real story began only after the car returned to the garage. Because once the race ended, the FIA began reviewing the telemetry from the RB22. And that review is not just routine curiosity. Hybrid power units in Formula One operate under extremely strict regulations. Teams are limited in how much electrical energy they can deploy, how the battery can discharge, how the energy recovery systems behave under braking. Every parameter is monitored. Which means when a car experiences an unusual electrical interruption, the governing body often asks for a deeper explanation. Not necessarily because a team did something illegal, but because hybrid systems are incredibly complex. And when something fails unexpectedly, it can reveal unusual behavior inside the power unit. That is why the FIA now wants to understand exactly what happened inside the Red Bull Ford engine during those final laps in Shanghai. Was it simply a component failure? A battery problem? A control electronics glitch? Or something related to the way the hybrid system was managing energy throughout the race? Right now, nobody outside the Red Bull garage knows the answer. And that uncertainty is exactly why the situation feels so serious. Because if the failure was just a random component issue, the fix might be simple. Replace the part. Adjust the software. Move on to the next race. But if the root cause lies deeper in the integration between the Ford power unit and the RB22 chassis, then Red Bull could be facing a much bigger challenge than a single DNF. But the real tension surrounding Red Bull does not come only from the retirement itself. It comes from what that retirement might reveal about the entire RB22 project. Because if you look closely at the Chinese Grand Prix weekend, the engine failure was not the first warning sign. It was simply the moment when everything finally collapsed. Throughout the entire weekend in Shanghai, Verstappen had already been struggling with the behavior of the car. The balance never looked comfortable. Corner entry felt unstable. Traction on corner exit was inconsistent. And no matter what setup changes the team tried, Verstappen kept repeating the same message. The car did not feel right. At one point during the weekend he even described every lap as survival. For a driver who has dominated Formula One for several seasons, that statement immediately caught the attention of the paddock. Because Verstappen is known for adapting to difficult cars. He can drive around oversteer. He can manage unstable rear grip. He can extract performance from almost anything. But the RB22 appears to be different. According to several engineers analyzing the situation, the car may suffer from a very narrow operating window. That means the car only performs properly when every condition is perfectly aligned. Ride height, tire temperature, energy deployment, aerodynamic balance. If even one of those factors moves slightly outside the ideal range, the performance drops dramatically. Shanghai may have exposed exactly that weakness. The circuit is one of the most demanding tracks in the world for hybrid systems. Long straights, heavy braking zones, multiple acceleration phases. If the energy recovery system is not perfectly tuned, the car begins to lose performance lap after lap. And some analysts believe the RB22 was already struggling with energy management even before the final failure occurred. Sometimes the electric boost looked strong. Other times it faded earlier than expected. Which suggests the hybrid system may have been working harder than it should just to remain competitive. Then came the moment that shocked the entire paddock. At one stage of the race, Verstappen was actually lapped by the race leader before the retirement. For fans who watched Red Bull dominate the sport in recent years, that image felt almost impossible. The reigning champion being overtaken by the leader on pure pace. And only a few laps later, the RB22 slowed again. Power dropped. The team called Verstappen into the pits. And the race was over. Meanwhile, on the other side of the garage, Isaac Hadjar managed to bring the second Red Bull home in 8th place. A respectable result for the rookie. But it also highlighted something uncomfortable for the team. Because the gap between Verstappen and Hadjar throughout the weekend was surprisingly small. Which again suggests that the limitation may not be the driver. It may simply be the car. And that is why the situation has become so serious for Red Bull tonight. Because the team now faces two different challenges at the same time. First, they must understand exactly why the power unit failed. Second, they must solve the deeper performance issues that made the RB22 so difficult to drive throughout the weekend. Solving either one of those problems would already be complicated. Solving both at the same time could take weeks, maybe months. And while Red Bull works on those solutions, the rest of the grid is moving forward. Mercedes looked extremely strong in Shanghai. Ferrari remained competitive. Several teams appear to have understood the new technical regulations faster than expected. Which means Red Bull can no longer rely on the massive performance advantage it once had. Now they must fight, develop, and solve problems under pressure. That is why the FIA investigation adds another layer of tension. Because while Red Bull engineers analyze the failure inside the garage, the governing body is also reviewing the data from Verstappen's car. Energy deployment, battery behavior, electrical stability. Everything that happened inside the hybrid system during those final laps. And until the exact cause of the failure becomes clear, one question will continue echoing throughout the paddock. Was the Chinese Grand Prix simply an unlucky technical failure? Or did it just expose the first real weakness in Red Bull's new Ford-powered engine project? And the most important part of this entire story may still be ahead of us. Because what happens in the next few days will determine whether the Chinese Grand Prix becomes a minor footnote or the beginning of a much larger crisis for Red Bull. Inside the garage tonight, engineers are already downloading every piece of telemetry from Verstappen's car. Every lap, every braking zone, every moment of energy deployment. They will examine the exact second when the power unit began losing performance. They will look at the voltage behavior inside the battery pack. They will analyze the communication between the hybrid control electronics and the engine management software. And most importantly, they will try to understand why the electrical interruption occurred when the steering wheel display briefly shut down. Because moments like that are never random. In a Formula One car, every electrical component is part of a tightly connected network. If one signal fails, it can affect the entire system. Hybrid deployment can stop. Energy recovery can be interrupted. Control units may trigger protective shutdowns to prevent damage. That is why Verstappen's car did not explode or stop immediately. Instead, the system reduced performance. The power unit essentially protected itself. But the consequences for the race were the same. A dramatic loss of power. A forced retirement. And now, a full technical investigation. Meanwhile, the FIA will be studying exactly the same data. Not because they suspect Red Bull of breaking the rules, but because hybrid systems are among the most regulated parts of a modern Formula One car. Every team must respect strict limits on energy deployment, battery discharge rates, energy recovery levels, and electronic control strategies. If something unusual appears in the telemetry, the governing body has the authority to review it carefully. Sometimes these reviews confirm that a simple component failed. Other times they reveal unexpected interactions between different parts of the power unit. And occasionally, they expose deeper weaknesses inside a design. That possibility is exactly what makes this moment so important for Red Bull. Because the RB22 is not just another car in their long history. It represents the beginning of a new engine era. The collaboration with Ford. A project designed to build Red Bull's future power units. An ambitious engineering challenge that combines aerodynamics, hybrid systems, cooling architecture, and electronic control strategies. Projects like this rarely become perfect immediately. They evolve. They improve with data. They become stronger with experience. But the first races of a season often reveal problems that thousands of simulation hours could not predict. China may have been one of those moments. A race that exposed weaknesses under real conditions. High temperatures. Full race distance. Maximum electrical loads. Exactly the type of stress that reveals hidden flaws. If that is the case, Red Bull engineers will now face a race of their own. A race against time. They must find the cause, design the solution, test the fix, and implement it before the next Grand Prix. Because Formula One does not pause. The calendar keeps moving. The championship keeps evolving. And while Red Bull analyzes data inside the garage, their rivals are gaining momentum on track. Mercedes looked incredibly strong in Shanghai. Ferrari remained close. Other teams are improving rapidly as they understand the new technical regulations. Which means Red Bull cannot afford many more weekends like this one. One difficult race can be explained. Two might be unlucky. But if the RB22 continues to struggle with reliability and balance, the entire championship narrative could begin to change. And that is why the Chinese Grand Prix may become one of the most important races of the season. Not because of who won, but because of what it revealed. A struggling car.